You're listening to the Oneofus.net podcast network.
They come from the bowels of hell, guided by a master plan for complete domination of the earth.
It arouses such emotion that the management has been forced to state positively no refund.
That theme song is courtesy of Robert Summers. Thank you very much.
Well, it was clear no one else was going to step up.
You did very well done, I think. Yay.
Thanks, everybody. Don't have to say that.
We do. It's true, but we mean it anyway.
Thanks.
We don't mean it. We do mean it. We don't really.
She can hear you.
Well, hopefully any of the listeners like it.
Yes, I hope they will too. And this is Deliberations of Doom. We are on episode 10.
Holy cow.
Yeah, not counting the video that we did for the Bad Batch.
Right, yeah.
Which was fun.
It's a good video. If you haven't checked it out, check it out.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to do until they started the movie.
Thankfully, you don't have to suffer through that in the video review.
That's very true. Today, we are going to, first we're going to talk about a recent horror film that we all got to see that we're going to give a review for, which is the Belko Experiment, which actually got a lot of notice, I suspect, largely because they plastered James Gunn all over the advertisements for it. You know, of course, who did the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, but he just wrote it, did not direct it, but nonetheless, definitely worthy of speaking of. And then the rest of our episode, we're going to be talking about our picks for off-the-beaten-track vampire films that are worth seeing. And suffice it to say, we will not all agree about each other's picks.
I don't think we ever agree, though.
Yeah, we should definitely point out who picked what movie.
We're going to go around.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Sure. But let's get started with talking about the Belko Experiment, which, like I said, written by James Gunn, directed by Greg McLean, who is a director I'm not fond of. I finally saw Wolf Creek. Like, I hadn't seen it because I remember my friend Cargill was like, don't see it, man. I know you and you're going to hate it. And I was like, but everybody seems to like it. And I finally watched it like a month ago. I was like, wow, I hate this movie.
I love it.
I would have thought you would have liked it, Chris.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
It's just, I don't know. It's kind of misogynist.
Yeah.
And it's really, like, unnecessarily brutal. And there's no fun to it on any level. It's just, like, unrelenting, like, almost torture porny. You know?
Yes.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it definitely came out in that wave of those. And it suffers from the let's go back even though we're home free.
Yeah. Oh my God, characters doing the stupidest shit. You're like, what are you doing?
Yeah, at the same time, a damn good looking movie. I remember he directed
It's well shot.
Yeah.
Now, the Belko Experiment is the only other film he's done that's not a Wolf Creek movie. He did Wolf Creek.
No, he did was it The Darkness? The Darkness for, I think, what's his face? Also for Blumhouse, I believe, with Kevin Bacon.
No, you're right.
And he did a giant crocodile movie.
Rogue,
yeah.
Okay, I didn't see that.
Which is the first place we ever saw Sam Worthington.
But Wolf Creek is definitely has been his money ticket.
Yeah, did you guys know there's a Wolf Creek TV show?
He's working on it right now. Yeah, a Wolf Creek television series.
I'll watch that.
I don't know what about that storyline spins sequels and spin-offs. It's a crazy guy in the Outback who just kills people.
Because it's horror. If your movie makes any money at all, they're going to find a way to make a sequel to it. You know?
And it's based on a real-life serial killer who's never been caught in Australia.
Yes, it is. That is true.
I didn't know that. You know what? Let's make a lot of these things now.
As far as I know, the Belko Experiment is not based on a real-life situation. I certainly hope not. The idea being here is that it's a Belko Industries owns this huge office building that's put out in the middle of Bogota, Colombia, that's mainly imported Americans working there, although there's a certain amount of locals there as well. We follow our main character, I believe it's John. Is it John Gallagher Jr.?
Yep.
Yep. Who is basically the Jim from The Office of this movie. Or he would be if it was a funny movie, which it kind of isn't.
He even looks like him.
Yeah, he look kind of, but they're definitely like making you feel, he's the Jim from The Office. He even has kind of like a thing with a girl there. You're just like, okay, they're setting you up for him definitely being the protagonist of this film. And, you know, you're introduced to a lot of other characters who are working here. His girlfriend is Leandra, played by Adria Arjona, who is gorgeous. Yeah. The chief operating officer of the company, who seems like the greatest boss ever, is played by Tony Goldwyn, who's an old
Can I add a little tidbit? Yeah. He hasn't aged a day since Ghost.
No, I know.
I look at him, I go, it's the villain from Ghost. Who is it? I go, he's the same.
He looks exactly the same.
He's a vampire.
Yeah.
He's a vampire.
Fitting with today's theme.
And then you have like a lot of familiar faces, like Michael Rooker, who's sadly only in this for a little bit.
I know.
Which you're like, man, really? Michael Rooker plays the head of maintenance here. And what's his name? Who's
Dr.
playing
Cox.
the crazy guy?
Sean Gunn's always in it.
Yeah,
Sean
Sean
Gunn
Gunn's
has an
it
appearance.
always,
But who's the guy who's like the most aggressive guy?
John McGinley.
Yeah, McGinley is like the guy who, like, right off the bat.
Dr.
This
Cox,
is the dude that's going to get unhinged more than anybody. And the idea is, like, metal shutters suddenly come down on the place. A voice comes out of nowhere. The loudspeaker is like, "Hey guys, it's a special work day today. You guys have this much time until this many people are dead at your own hands, or we'll kill even more of you."
Because they have tracers in their head.
Yeah, they're like, "Oh yeah, there's a lot of kidnappings in Colombia, so we're giving you tracers so we can find you," not mentioning there's also high-powered explosives in said tracers. So it turns into a sort of like, what kind of people are you type of experiment, as our main character, Mike, is like, "No, we don't have to we can find another way. There's got to be another way to do this. We don't have to kill each other." And the other characters are like, "Nope, we're going to have to kill." And it's basically a smorgasbord.
Yeah, that'll work.
That's when the Borg kill everyone.
A cornucopia.
A cornucopia of murder, of graphic, brutal murder. Which obviously you can tell right now, just hearing that description, this is either totally your type of movie, or you're like, "I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole." But what did you guys think about this?
I liked it. I actually had really low expectations because I know this did not do very well in the theaters, and everyone seemed to have like a lot of disappointment surrounding this movie, from what I can tell. But I actually enjoyed the movie. I also like gory stuff, so that was there. At one point, there's like this sort of like execution style firing line, and I was like, wow, that was kind of rough to watch, which made that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I'm kind of 50-50 on it, and I've got like a lot of kind of guesswork into it. I feel like, I don't know if it's a fact, and I'm just guessing at this. I feel like James Gunn maybe wrote this script a little while ago.
That's what I feel.
And just kind of was sitting on it, and then like, hey, look, I'm famous now, and
I can make whatever I
somebody
want.
takes it and runs with it. But to me, watching the advertising, I thought it was more of like a comedy horror action, and it was actually really bleak and sad.
No, this is
and
not a
really
comedy
dark.
horror.
It's like Schindler's List sad in some moments.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my god, they're like, who has children? Get over here. Who's old? Get over there.
There are little wink, wink, nudge, nudge moments of
But it gets
humor,
dark.
and a little bit of sort of like, Jesus, that killing was so over the top, you might laugh, but it's not a comedy horror.
It's not. It's very serious and dark.
Like Sean Gunn is kind of like the comedy relief, and he's not. Very
But even his
comical.
actions,
he's still not comical.
and things that he's doing could, like dumping water coolers, which could actually kill people. And there's things in there that were kind of, and I get it was probably a statement on the workplace in America and being a hostage to your job, and I get that.
Sure.
But I feel like the premise was so flawed to the fact where it was like really explosives in people's heads, and that's how you're going to get. It's like, we know what's going to happen in this experiment. I know people are going to start killing each other, and why are we doing this then?
Yeah.
Like, what are you learning from this? And to me, the flaw was in I did not care about that because I knew it was going to happen. And to me, it was well made.
Yeah.
I just didn't dig it.
This is well made too. I guess I was very much expecting something different than what it was. It's one of those films I feel like, give it a year or two, I'll come back to and feel like I'll like more.
Yeah, I don't hate it at all. I just did nothing for me.
It's very well executed, so to speak.
Yeah.
There's a lot of executions in it. It was really just that utter bleakness of this film. It's so dark.
That's what I liked about it.
Almost removes any sense of fun to have with the film. And when I see a movie that's this much sort of like crazy creative carnage, I want it to be fun. And not just like getting more and more disturbed as it goes on.
I think with mainstream horror, they're all like, especially nowadays, it's all glossy. They're all highly polished. Everything has a happy ending. And I kind of liked how bleak it was. I thought it was refreshing.
But I felt it was forced. It was forced bleakness out of me.
Yeah.
Like the storyline was so forced. Like there's no way I would take a job and they're like, hey, let me put this steel ball on the back of your head. That's gonna. I mean, like no.
I'd be like that.
I can
that's a
find
deal
another
breaker.
job.
That makes sense. Estes, what do you think?
I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was smart. I thought it played with the premise in a really neat way. It was a really cool cast of not necessarily the biggest stars in the world, but people that I always like in other things.
Lots of people you recognize.
Yeah.
Where do I know them from?
And you're like, oh, I like when that guy shows up. And I think it's interesting you guys talk about the bleakness. I don't think you can avoid how bleak the movie is, and there's an inevitability to what's going to happen. But I think what I really liked about the movie was I felt that it did not wallow in that, which I think a lot of movies do. And I felt that he was able to navigate that, especially the thing that we keep talking about, which there's a big sort of execution scene that could be, I think in another movie, would take that and run with it and just really focus on that. And I think that's really what I liked about the movie was it didn't forget that it was a thriller. It didn't forget that it was trying to be entertaining. And I guess other people would take the movie to task for that. I don't. I think, you have other movies like something like, say, I don't know, Blindness or something where you have almost the same kind of premise. You have these people pitted against each other in this pressure cooker. And it's too high-minded. This is not a high-minded movie, which is fine. I like that about it. I really liked McLean's direction a lot. I thought it's slick. I feel like this is the kind of movie that other film critics would point to and say, this is what's wrong with America. This is what's wrong with cinema. This is just trash. It's a terrible, violent, horrible, nihilistic movie. To which I would reply, yeah, and that's really what I liked about it. But I don't think it's a trashy movie. But in that same sense, I don't think it's a super high-minded movie that thinks it's above the material. So I thought it kind of hit the mark for what it was trying to do. And I especially have to say, I thought it had a really great last 5 or 10 minutes.
I did too. It gets very Cabin in the Woods-ish.
Yeah,
and it
could.
And it really could be a film that just falls apart at the end. And instead, it really came together in a great way. I really liked where it went. There's a person who shows up right at the end of the movie who's an actor I always like to see.
You
again.
recognize right off the bat.
And what they did with him and his look almost felt like something from a different movie, like almost like an 80s movie or something.
It made you feel like you were suddenly in the part of a bigger thing.
And I enjoyed that. And so, the last shot is great. So I don't know. This is not a movie I would recommend to everybody.
No.
But I do think, and I would say, it's not a horror film per se, but I would recommend it to horror fans especially.
Yeah, if you like Die Hard, you'll love this.
Yeah.
If you like the Muppet movie,
or
you'll
The
love
Raid.
this.
If you're a fan of Muppets Take Manhattan.
Or Dread, or any of those.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys covered almost everything that I kind of had a lot of feelings watching this movie, and you guys covered almost all of them. I thought of a lot of different movies watching this one, like Battle Royale, which I think is probably a superior film, but was definitely a template for what this movie is, which that's obviously the pitch was The Office meets Battle Royale. Russ is right. I think that, and you guys are right too. I feel like it is sort of ugly in nature, and it could probably be more fun in some places. It could be more kind of goofy or played like satirically, and McLean seems to like a bit of the darker edge to it. That he brings that Wolf Creek sort of brutalness to it.
He's really about the ugliness of humanity.
Yeah, but at the same time, with what Russ was saying, that it doesn't wallow in it in the way something like Michael Haneke's Funny Games does, where it's like, oh, you want blood and carnage? Here you go. Isn't this awful?
By the way, I fucking hate that movie.
I fucking hate that movie too.
It's a guy going, I'm going to make a horror movie that tells you why you suck for liking horror movies.
Yeah.
I'm like, go fuck
that
yourself,
is
Haneke.
definitely a movie. Yeah, that's a movie that evokes very strong feelings. We'll talk about that one later. But
Another time.
I know, because we'll go off on a tangent for the rest of this, and that is a movie you can go on and on about. This movie is better than that. It's more of a movie. It's fun. It is short too, which I have to give props for. It keeps moving the whole time.
Yeah, I was excited about that 93 or 88 minutes. Yeah, I was excited when I saw that. I was like, sweet.
I think that shows that while there is some fairly upsetting stuff, it doesn't stay on screen long. And honestly, for a movie that is about such dark material, it didn't stick with me. I didn't think about it much after I saw it, because I saw it in the theater like when it came out. I didn't think about it much afterwards. I was like, it's fine. It's like, for like genre fans or like sci-fi horror fans, this is a good enough way to waste time as long as you're not easily offended or upset by things. So it is bleak, but it is a little more. I think if you want to just watch people get picked off, there's this movie called The Circle, which is on Netflix, and it's literally people just getting whacked every 3 minutes.
I was actually thinking of, there's another one called, I think, House of Nine, which is also kind of similar to this, which is a well-done indie horror.
Yeah, those are a little bit more like, oh, shit, people going down. But but this one is, I would agree that I wish it was a little more farcical, sort of fun or something, but overall, I mean, I think it's a fairly solid.
I tried to track down for you guys. In fact, I contacted the rep from South by and everything. It's like, is there any way I can get a copy of Mayhem to show people?
Oh,
right.
yeah.
I saw us at South by.
It's similar, right?
Similar.
It's Joe Lynch making a movie that is, kind of similar with Stephen Yuen, who was Glenn from The Walking Dead. Mm-hmm. And it's exactly... It does everything right that I didn't like about the Belko Experiment, where it's carnage but it's doing it with very tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
It's there to have a good time. There's lots of ironic deaths.
It's
and
like
what have
Belko
you.
with zombies, right?
Yeah, basically. Like, it's a rage virus type thing where everybody goes crazy, and it has this running line where the main guy is kind of like I have to do this because then I'm going to have a better job if I survive this too. Yeah. You know, like I'm going to lose my job unless I get through this and die. So he's such an interesting anti-hero character where you like him and don't like him at the same time.
I feel like if you would have taken the guns out of Belko, it would have been a better movie.
Yeah, possibly.
They would have had to be creative on how they would have to do things. They would have made for a more inventive movie.
And that's kind of one of the things I loved about La Horde which is also kind of similar, but with zombies, is like they run out of they run out of bullets, and so they have to get really super creative. Like, you know, they're killing people with toilets, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I just feel they could have been more inventive.
That's a good note. I agree with that.
I would also like to add, just as a recommendation, if you like this movie, there's a really good book by a crime writer and comic book writer named Dwayne Sherzinski called Severance Package, which is kind of the same setup where they find out that their agency is part of a spy network, and they're shutting the agency down, so they all have to kill each other. And it's pretty good.
That sounds badass.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
He did Facebook. This movie sounds real familiar.
Sounds like Kingsman 2 might have a certain aspect of that as well. It sounds like the spy network's broken wide open and now everybody's trying to kill everybody. Mm-hmm. But we'll see.
That's not a horror film, Chris.
But it is pretty damn violent. All right, so moving on to vampires, and not John Carpenter's because we discussed that one already.
Yeah.
And nor would
we can talk about it again.
I don't think anyone would would have grabbed it as their pick for this list. But we figured we'd at least talk about the two most formative vampire movies, which is not Nosferatu and Dracula. And starting Nosferatu, one of those films a lot of people are like, yeah, I probably should see it at some time. And they never have. You can watch the damn thing on YouTube. I mean, it's out there. It's a 1922. If you're a student of film, a masterpiece of expressionism, although I still go with Cabinet of Dr. Caligari for that period of being the best of the best. But Nosferatu is a fascinating little movie. It's pretty short. F.W. Murnau making this film, starring the Max Schreck as the vampire Count Orlok. They had to change his name because Bram Stoker's estate was not pleased anyone was making this, so they had to keep changing things around a bit in order to not get sued, which they did anyway.
And they had to destroy all the copies, correct?
Yeah, this film almost was completely lost, strangely. But now, of course, you can get it.
It's ubiquitous.
Yeah. And what's the name of the movie about Shrek? The narrative film?
Shadow of the Empire.
Great fun take. What if Shrek was Max Schreck, who was really a total oddball in real life, was actually a Nosferatu vampire, and the director realized this, was like, I'm going to make a film around this guy. He's going to be great. Great. I think that's a really fun movie. I really enjoyed it. And a very educational piece, actually, despite being fictional, there's a lot of stuff in there that's real, about the making of the film and the difficulties and how fucking psychotic Max Schreck actually was. He was like a real whack job of a guy. But
well, that wasn't his name, because they tried to that actually is, I think, a word for fear. Max Schreck is the actual, that's what it's
I believe you're correct.
So I think they tried to build a legend like he just showed up and he was like this, and then he made the movie and he vanished, but he was a weirdo.
It's interesting that depiction of Dracula or vampire with the long extended fingers and the bald head and the pointed ears has become a specific sideline of vampires for what you call Nosferatu. Like, as if there's a difference between a vampire and a Nosferatu now. Nosferatu are like the ugly, deformed ones, and vampires tend to be sexy.
Yeah.
Sexy and mysterious.
Yeah.
I mean, they even call vampire Nosferatu and the Dracula made 8 years later.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I will recommend, there's a lot of different versions out here on DVD and Blu-ray of this, and a lot of them are pretty cool with stuff they do to it. Like, there's a lot of different people who've soundtracked it and everything, and it's worth taking a look.
The one I saw had the entire score redone by the London Symphony Orchestra,
right.
And it sounded amazing, and they also did like a new color pass at it as well, so it had some tints to it.
Yeah, there's so many different versions available.
I just bought the one on iTunes, so I was like, fuck it, I might as well own it. I'm going to watch it again sometime soon here.
I think I have like 3 different copies of it throughout my collection and various compilations and shit.
I wasn't even aware of that.
Now, Bram Stoker's, well, not Bram Stoker's Dracula, it's a totally different film, but the film the first film called Dracula was in 1931, directed by the great Todd Browning, who did many other good things afterwards, starring Bela Lugosi in the role of, there's no other, you gotta call it the role of his lifetime, because it was. It was, despite him trying to get away from it for years, he eventually embraced it and was buried in the Dracula cape.
Well, he begged for this job.
Yeah.
Yeah, they went after
to secure the movie.
They went after Cheney Sr. and he had throat cancer or something and couldn't do it. And then he begged and lowballed everybody in Hollywood to get the job.
Right.
And based on a stage play that was already immensely popular at that time.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting sidelines people don't realize about this, back then Universal, always trying to save money and realizing there was actually a big Spanish-speaking audience, filmed at the same time a Spanish version using the exact same sets and props and everything. That's actually a longer and some even say better film. I don't know. I still haven't watched it. I have it. I've just never gotten around to watching that version of it.
They just do more cool things with the camera, and they take more risks.
Yeah.
And so you see cooler special effects in camera at that time would have been really difficult to pull off, and they pull off better tracking shots, with better smoke shots, there's more things breaking, and it's just more fun and more edgy. Even the women have more low-cut outfits on.
Nice.
It's definitely more edgy.
I think it's fascinating that Dracula's budget was $355,000 in 1931.
That had to be a huge budget for the time.
It's equivalent of $5 million plus today. But $355,000, like a later film that we're going to talk about, Afflictive, their budget was only $300,000 in modern day. Can you imagine, where did that money go? Where did that money go? Because, like you said, Bela Lugosi took a huge pay cut. I think it was like $700 a week.
$500
a week. Which was that's still a lot of money.
It's half of what
it's still $52,000 total, but where did that money go?
You watch this movie, the appeal is definitely the biggest appeal. Bela Lugosi himself, who is mesmerizing in this part. And it doesn't, the technique they use, which I believe is the first time anybody did this, of using spotlights specifically on his eyes when he was giving you the look, the Dracula look, still looks really cool and fun. And then the sets, which are just jaw-droppingly beautiful.
The sets are beautiful, that's for sure.
Just gorgeous, huge.
I wonder if that budget
things.
was for both this movie and the Spanish one.
Probably not. They probably gave the Spanish film $20 grand.
20 grand was
make it
here.
work. But something that I wanted to just jump back to really quick, because I find it interesting throughout vampire lore and vampire films, is in Nosferatu, Murnau rewrote the last 12 pages. It wasn't in his script, and put in there that Dracula dies in the sunlight.
Yeah.
And that was never part of Bram Stoker's, novel. Sunlight just weakened vampires, didn't kill them.
Right.
Now it is known as fact that a vampire can't go in the sun because of an unauthorized movie that was made in Germany.
Yeah, otherwise they sparkle.
Yeah, well, no, that we don't know about that one.
That's not, no.
But think about how cool that is. Somebody just kind of wrote their own 12 pages, and now it's known as, fact, vampires can't be in the sun.
It's like the whole
Canon.
Return of the Living Dead. The satire is the one where zombies eat brains come from. Everyone assumes that's from Romero. It's like, no, it was the spoof that added that into the lore.
Right.
Strangely enough. But, I think this is really worth watching. It's not that long. It's 85 minutes. And if you get a newer version, one of the issues with this film, watching it without the added soundtrack, is there is no soundtrack. And it gets pretty dry. You're like, wow, this is something feels like it's missing. And there's no music. I really recommend if you get a copy with this, and the new Universal releases all have it, is Philip Glass recorded a soundtrack for this that's terrific.
It's beautiful.
And goes with it so well.
Oh, wow.
One thing that I thought was really apparent is the script was adapted from the stage play more than it was the book.
Yeah.
And when you watch it, it feels like you're watching White Christmas, but with a Count Dracula there, because it's all inside one area, and people just kind of walk into a room like, oh, what are you doing here, Renfield? Oh, looking for the master. And then, oh, hello. And it's just very olden day
the thing
sitcom, soap
he
opera.
Looks out the window. He's like, look, did you see him? He's running away. He's turned into a wolf. And you're like,
it's very much a Broadway play, because you have to think set pieces.
Sure.
And the only thing I hate about this movie is the ending.
Yeah.
It's so you know what? Spoiler alert, whatever. It's been out for 7 years, or whatever. If you haven't seen it yet, they're chasing him, He's carrying the woman. He closes the door. They break the door down, and then he's sleeping in his coffin.
Yeah, no,
so they are chasing him.
He was tired. He carried that chick the whole way.
He literally just goes to sleep in the climax of the movie.
Very anticlimactic, as is like the death of Lucy, which is totally off screen. You're just like, wait, Lucy's dead? Did I miss that?
I didn't even catch that had happened.
Yeah, it's not other characters going, oh yeah, she's dead. Didn't we mention
She's
that earlier?
laying over there
Don't worry
dead.
about it.
One of the things I want to talk about Nosferatu is, I guess, Robert Eggers is going to be remaking Nosferatu, the director of
heard
The
that,
Witch.
yeah.
So that should be really interesting to see where that goes, because he definitely has that ambiance.
Yeah,
so.
very atmospheric.
Yeah, he'd kill that.
And not the first person to remake it, obviously. We had the one with Kloskinski playing the lead role, Kloskinski by Werner Herzog, that I think is totally worth watching. Totally different movie than the original. I mean, wow, what a different take on the story.
Yeah.
But, you know.
It's got my ex-wife, Isabella Jonte, in it.
Your future ex-wife?
Yeah, that's right.
I really liked revisiting these movies. I hadn't seen them in a long time. I do have to say with Nosferatu, the stuff with the vampire is truly iconic. It's everything everybody says it is. But you've probably seen most of it on clip shows or David Bowie videos. And the stuff with the silent movie is not my favorite. I'm not a huge silent movie guy. But I would say that as far as the Dracula, it was a little stilted, but I had forgotten it was a really entertaining movie.
Yeah.
And it's one of those black and white movies I think you might be like, is this going to be worth watching? Like, because I do think some movies, you go back and watch them, like, as Chris and I discussed the other day, The Mummy.
Yeah.
The original Mummy is
It's
just
not
not worth
great.
going back to, although I think Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein are. And I would put Dracula up there with this.
And the werewolf.
As worth checking out, like, beyond just curiosity. It's a good movie.
If you're interested in filmmaking, watch it and see what a difference 8 years makes. When you watch Nosferatu made 8 years prior, and then you watch this film, you go, wow, they have cut-ins and other angles and other things going on, and you see, like, sound came around in, 27 from the jazz singer, and, like, you see leaps and bounds in 8 years that you don't see in any other field, and it's really cool to watch them back-to-back and see where cinema evolved to and where we're coming from.
Always like how much we as Americans love to assume we invented everything in cinema, that was mainly us. And if you go back and watch the Germans' Expressionist period, you're like, Jesus Christ, they invented half the shit in cinema in the early
Horror cinema.
Yeah, but in cinema in general,
Yeah.
they were like, man, major technological advances and just ideas in shooting. They were like, wow, they did a lot of stuff, and then we took back over. Like, okay, we got it from here, Germany. Thanks.
Well, we did. Well, we also took all their directors.
Yes, we
Brought them
did.
over here to make our movies.
Yes, we did. We're like, you guys don't want to be in Germany right now, trust
It's a
me.
bad place.
Yeah. Well, I felt that watching these, I think Russ and I talked about, the vampire in Nosferatu is so iconic. It's really a really great vampire, and like you said, it basically initiates its own chain of this genre. And I think like if you watch movies when people have to put a vampire in the movie, it's always interesting. Do they go the Dracula route? Is that their vampire, or do they go the Nosferatu route? So you look at something like Salem's Lot, and you can say like Tobe Hooper's vampire is the Nosferatu vampire. Or you look at Carpenter's vampires, and obviously he likes the Count Dracula vampire. Mm-hmm. So each one you choose how do you look at these guys, or even like something like Blade 2, and you see obviously, Del Toro's going to pick Nosferatu because he's more of a monster. But it's a great take. And like you said, like it invents things like he's going to die in sunlight, and so you see how important these movies are. I did think Lugosi's Dracula, they cut to those. They have a lot of close-ups of him.
Yeah.
One or two of them, like his first, they have that amazing, beautiful, floating sort of tracking shot towards him. Really neat, and you can see how influential it is. But it is a very theatrical movie. It's a little
goofy.
It feels a little stage-bound in some ways. It starts pretty good. I also didn't know that Renfield was like the guy that goes.
I know, well, because I've never seen a version where Renfield is one of the primary characters before Dracula. Before this,
usually he's already been turned by the time Harker.
Yes,
gets there.
he's kind of like the guy who fills in a bit of exposition.
Right.
He adds a little bit of creep, but he's definitely not a big character. Here, he is when you watch Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Scorsese or Coppola one, like. Renfield's part is taken over by
Tom Waits.
No. I mean, like in the beginning.
Oh, right.
Where in here, Renfield's the one who is the solicitor who goes to Count Dracula's castle and meets with them. In Coppola's version,
It's Harker. Right?
It's Harker who does
Yeah.
it. And
This was more like Samwise and Frodo.
he plays a great crazy guy, Dwight Fry.
He started off, I'm like, I don't like this guy. And then as soon as he became Renfield, I was like, this guy's great.
I agree. Yeah.
All right, well, we should probably move on to our picks for the our not necessarily the best vampire movies, but the ones we thought were interesting and should be discussed that aren't always put on people's list for best vampire films. Now, I guess just going down the order of the list I put in here, which is arbitrary. We'll start with Rob with his Only Lovers Left Alive, which I'm just going to say of this whole list, this is one of my favorite movies on this list.
I thought I was going to hate this movie.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, this is a good movie.
Yeah, this
I'm
is
not
like
gonna
one of
like
those
it.
artsy, not artsy, but thinker films, which I'm not a big, into thinker films. But I thought I was going to absolutely hate this movie. I'm not a huge fan of Tilda Swinton. And she was actually my favorite part of this movie. I'm not a fan of emo Tom Hiddleston. Like, his emo-ness was just too much for me. But I love Tilda Swinton's character.
Like, dude, play songs in the Downward Spiral.
You're right.
This movie is just, you really don't get to see a lot of, like, vampires who are just like, okay, we've been alive for this long, we're super, super smart, like, we can speak Latin.
Yeah, that's the premise being essentially we meet two vampires, Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston, and they've been alive for, I don't think it ever says specifically, but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. They are old vampires. And they both kind of fallen into their rut of a life because they're kind of like having trouble engaging with what the world has become, or people today, which they refer to as the zombies. Tom Hiddleston is really into music. When we first meet him, he's hanging out with Anton Yelchin, R.I.P., who hopefully is a vampire somewhere. I'm just saying. We want Yelchin to go on.
And John Hurt.
And John Hurt. Also R.I.P.
Yelchin is like a young a getter for Tom Hiddleston, whose character who doesn't want to leave his big old creaky house in the middle of the rundown area of Detroit. And he brings them stuff. When he first see he's bringing him anything, he's bringing him like 5 amazing, awesome vintage guitars, which you're like, oh, he's a musician. Meanwhile, Tilda Swinton is off in, I forget where she is.
Morocco?
I think Morocco.
Yeah,
and she's hanging out
Tangier.
with also, like you said, R.I.P. John Hurt, who's playing Christopher Marlowe, the famous writer. And there's a joke about him having actually written Hamlet in here and
He's
stuff.
also a vampire.
Yeah, who's also a vampire. Well, it's modern day. So.
Yeah.
And it comes down to these two getting back together, these two main characters in the same place, and then the entry of another character, played by Mia Wasikowska, who is a vampire neither one of them particularly likes, but there's a certain amount of auto-loyalty among what appears to be a very small group of vampires that are around, and she kind of throws their lives into chaos. But that is the plot, and this is Jim Jarmusch in a film that's, I feel like, feels like more of a rock and roll movie than a horror movie, really. You know?
Sure.
I mean, it's so filled with music, largely recorded by Jarmusch and his band himself. But it's beautifully ambient, like his films tend to be, but it also moves pretty fast, all things considered, you know? And what I think I like best about it is the only vampire movie I can think of that's about what it would be like to have lived this long. It's not really about the other aspects of being a vampire. It's about that sort of ennui and where do you go from here, and, how do you even relate to anyone when you've lived for like 1,000 years?
I just felt like this is one of the things that I hated about Interview with a Vampire, was there's this dichotomy between Lestat, who's like fun, loving, and a little bit of a monster, but he's embracing life, and then there's Louis, who you just want to punch in the face because you're just like, get over yourself, Louis.
We were talking about this, and I'm like, I feel like if vampires were real and you know it because you became one, you'd be like, Well, I'm a super predator, so fuck that Louis bullshit. I'm gonna go kill. I'll go kill some bad guys.
I'm gonna enjoy my immortality, and
I'm
so
gonna Morbius the vampire. This shit.
This is very much like that. There's like Tom Hiddleston, who is the Louis, who's just like, oh, poor me, I'm miserable, I hate myself, I have to live with all of these zombies, and you're like, dude, just like go out and like I don't know, get laid or something. Like seriously. Yeah. But then Tilda Swinton is also like the Lestat, but not quite as she's not quite as monstrous. Yeah,
really.
she's fun loving and she's loving her life, and she finds joy in just even the little simple things like mushrooms and like fungi, not like eating mushrooms.
Yeah. Well, maybe
I don't know.
I used to be a big Jarmusch fan. Then something happened and I stopped watching his stuff, and then I didn't watch this one. Just because I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen Jarmusch film in a while. I think the last one I saw was Ghost Dog. Yeah, okay. Ghost Dog, and I loved Ghost Dog.
He didn't do Oh God. That was someone.
No, sorry, I couldn't remember. Yeah, but Ghost Dog with Forrest Whitaker was the last one I saw, and I loved it.
That's a great.
And then I kind of watched part. I love Jarmusch, and then I saw this movie, and I go, man, he's back. This is the best film he had done since Dead Man. It was so atmospheric and moody, and it was very like. I felt like the characters were all facets of himself. Like, if you look at how much he actually... Because the guy is a genius when it comes to anything art-related, music-related, pop culture-related. And you look at the guy's wall, at Tom Hiddleston's wall, it's like... It's almost like a wet dream for him, if you will. I wish I could have been part of all these people's lives. So I'm going to have this vampire be part of all these people's lives. And then, musically, I guarantee you all those guitars he actually owns.
You're right.
I bet you those were not props he found. He owns us, for sure. And, I really liked it because it was about like, blood being contaminated, be careful, addictions, be smart, enjoy art. And then it comes a point in time when it's like you were saying, go out and get laid. I'm sure there comes a point in time after 1,000 years and you're probably tired of fucking people. Yeah. I mean, like everything gets old. And the only thing he had that was great were like, the inventions he was doing. And it's kind of gotten to a point where he's out of stasis and he's done with life.
Yeah,
and
he's not even. He's so done with life. He's not even enjoying the benefits of being a vampire anymore. He, instead of going out and like going on the hunt, he goes to Jeffrey Wright, who works in a hospital, and like buys like blood from him, and you're like, wow, he's really
Well, biting people is so 15th century, Chris.
Mm-hmm. I disagree.
What kind of vampire Chris would be?
Yeah. So there's a lot of really cool pop culture stuff in there. Great music. I mean, the score was fantastic. Yeah. Actors are great. And I love the arc the characters go on. It was a cool journey, and it was different. And it's not violent. It's not gory. It's not fun. It's just beautiful, and it's a pleasant thing to watch.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say about Jarmusch, one thing you can't take away from the guy is he is cool. He makes cool movies. He was sort of the proto-hipster king of cool before that was even a thing in the 80s, and he has continued to do that. I found his filmography up and down depending on the movie.
Agreed.
But this movie is just, it's really what you want from a Jarmusch movie. Probably even more than some of his other movies. Like, I think it's very entertaining. I think it's accessible. And I think it doesn't, like, if you look at something like Ghost Dog, there is a sense that there's sort of an ironic distance to what he's doing with the Hitman movie. Whereas I don't feel that here. There doesn't seem to be an ironic distance in that sense. So, yeah, as far as vampire movies, I mean, I think this is a kind of a new classic. And it's just, I have to echo everybody else's sentiments. I don't know that I fell in love with it quite as much as you guys, or in particular Rob, who I remember after he saw it was just ecstatic and told me to drop everything and watch it. But it's a really, really good movie, and if you're a cinema lover, I find it hard to believe you wouldn't enjoy this movie on some level.
You know what I also want to say is the Germans are badass. Nobody gave this guy money. The Germans embraced cool, and they were like, this guy's been doing it before anybody else. He had Michael Fassbender, Tilda Swinton, and Mia Wasikowska attached.
Tom Hiddleston.
No, he had Fassbender.
He had Fassbender.
Had it for 7 years. Couldn't get it funded. And the Germans were like, "Was this does? You need the money?" And they just give it, and then he wound up getting a Hiddleston because it was too long for Fassbender to hold on.
Well, the Germans are still trying to make up for some stuff. So
okay, we're not including that. Artistically, they back things that don't have like a built-in market infrastructure, and you got to love that.
Yeah.
Like they're doing that. That's cool.
Them in Canada are great about that. You're making art. Here's some money.
I loved that. So sorry. To keep
I know. I think that's a good point. I think Russ is right. Like, I was over the moon for this movie. It starts with these swirling overhead shots of the characters and this amazing music, and I was just pulled in. And what am I watching? What is this? Like, I was just in. The vibe of this movie is cool as fuck. It is just awesome. Like, you just want to live in the world of this movie, and the like just the locations, like Hiddleston. And honestly, I'm not a huge Hiddleston fan. I like him all right. I think he's good, but he doesn't do much for me. And in this movie, I was just in. Like, I was like, dude, he is cool. And the movie uses him really well. I think it uses, emo Tom Hiddleston well. And the same with Tilda Swinton. I think one of the great things he thought of was Hiddleston's passions in the movie are music. And so he lives in this lair in Detroit that's covered in all this, like, electronic equipment, guitars, memorabilia. It feels like someone like that would have, that he would have surrounded his world, because he can't go out much. So he's built this really interesting world out of his affectations. One of the other moments I really loved was Tilda Swinton at a certain point packs to go see him, and when she does, she packs her book and she fetishizes the book. She looks over all of them. She touches the spines and the pages. It's so perfect.
And this difference between us when we pack to go somewhere, what do we bring? And a vampire has been alive for 1,000 years. What does she bring? She brings a book collection.
Her books. Yeah, that's her affectation. His is music, and the worlds that they have are so great. I love that. It plays with sort of it explores a little bit the existential idea of the vampire, that Hiddleston is tired and he's thinking about ending it, and that's why she goes to join him. But one of the other brilliant ideas of the movie that I think you sort of mentioned was the idea of the immortality, which is these two are totally in love with each other. They're not in love with other people. They're not sleeping with other people. But if you lived forever, time's not a factor. So they live apart for hundreds of years probably, or 50, 60, it's not really said, but decades at least. That idea was really neat to me, that you would be in love, but you wouldn't necessarily need to be there because, there's endless amounts of time to see them later. So I love that. Like, he would live in Detroit. She would live in Marrakesh. Is that what you guys said? I don't know.
Tangiers.
Okay, so the only thing that kind of throws me a little bit from the movie is the sister subplot.
Thank you.
It's interesting. The build-up to it's interesting because it's sort of this threat that looms that she's going to show up and she's a troublemaker. When she does show up, it feels a little arbitrary, like she just this sort of meet the parents kind of character, like, don't do this thing, I'm going to go do this thing. Like, it's an arbitrary conflict to the movie. The rest of the movie is so elegant and so beautifully put together. That's the one thing that feels a little manufactured or sort of forced to me. It throws me a little bit. It's probably the only black mark in the movie. I don't mind it because the other thing is the movie's smart enough to jettison it pretty quick. It's just like a chapter in the story.
I'll say I like it because the movie doesn't have any conflict without it.
Right.
Although it teases you into thinking the conflict is going to do with Yelchin's character.
Right.
Because it starts to convince you that Yelchin is secretly selling and giving away Tom Hiddleston's music.
Which he is.
Which he, presumably is, but you think that's going to be the conflict of the movie, and it's not. It's actually... Yeah. And I like that. It was a little bit of a misdirect, not a major one, but I like her character. She puts their lives in such stark, relief, and also she kind of in some ways is more representative of everything that they don't like about modern culture and life and why they don't like it,
I was going to say, I didn't mind it, even though what she does is so obvious, like, oh, don't leave her to do that. It's about how they react to that, though. That's what I liked. I like how... Tom Hiddleston and
that part's great because she's just all of a sudden out, and then they deal with it in an interesting way.
And then something really cool too about this film is you can literally analyze every frame. And when Jarmusch makes a movie, he doesn't just go like, "Oh, I've got a year to make this movie." He's been probably painstakingly planning it out for years.
Yeah,
even down to the location. It's an allegory for who they are as people, where they live.
Jarmusch is a vampire?
No, I'm just saying,
if he was,
he kind of is a Brooklyn hipster vampire.
But he films most of his stuff at night.
Yeah. This is completely filmed at night, and then even living in the part of Detroit that at one point was a booming, metropolis for industry, and now it's this broke down shell of itself.
Yeah.
Everything is, a metaphor for one thing or another, and it's brilliant. I mean, he's great.
Yeah.
I think Tom Hiddleston would say it best. He'd say, I want to bite you like a vampire. I want to feel your blood.
Let's just stop. Let's just stop right there.
Yes, that's
He
the
totally, I have no doubt that he was thinking about Trent Reznor when he was designing his character. No doubt. He's even an EDM musician. You're just like, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of rock and roll to this movie.
Oh, yeah.
That influence is stronger than probably even movies to it, I think, is the musical aspect of it.
Agreed.
I don't know. Okay, all right. Well, I'm so glad everybody liked this one because I had to pick a movie and I was like, I hope people aren't bored.
Well, let's move on to a Russell choice, which is 30 Days of Night. Russell, why don't you give us the lead in the plot description of this one for the 8 people out there who've never seen or heard of this movie?
30 Days of Night, which I would assume most people who have listened to this podcast, as Chris said, have seen this movie. Fairly recent film from about 10 years ago, based on a Steve Niles comic book, which is about a small town in is it Alaska, northern Alaska, and where at a certain point in the year you have 30 days, give or take, of darkness, and at that point a clan of rather violent vampires descends on the town to take it over and feed, and then this follows various characters as that begins to happen. The skeletal remains of who is still in the town. Most people leave the town when the 30 days happen, so the small crew of people that are left are forced to tend with the vampires.
Can I say right off the bat how much I am totally in love with Danny Huston every time he plays a bad guy, which is to say every movie he's in. Him playing the lead vampire here, which I think was really kind of a breakout role for him.
Yeah.
And I have to say, that was one of the reasons I picked this movie. The movie itself, I think, has problems, but the vision of the vampires, and in particular Huston's performance, which I really think is a one-of-a-kind performance that has been underrated. It's not a performance many people take note of, I think, because of the movie that it's in, the kind of movie that it is. But I think Danny Huston, it is a phenomenal performance for what it is. And the way they envisioned these creatures, because that's what they are. They don't have any real... They seem only vaguely related to humans. They're feral. And I think what was interesting about them is there is I think probably the reason I picked this movie, there is a scene where Huston is about to kill this one person, and it goes to a different place. They talk about something existential. They address the idea of God and God's role in this violent thing that is happening around them, and it's kind of out of character for a movie like this, but I think it's phenomenal, and Huston just kills it with that. It was interesting. I remember reading about, listening to the screenwriters talking about this movie, and one in particular talked about that if you think about your favorite scary movies, vampires aren't usually on that list. They're not. When we think of horror, we don't really think of vampires as particularly frightening creatures. I think because they've been fetishized in various different ways. And this movie went out of their way to make vampires really scary. They're scary. They're violent. They are not nice in any way, and I love that about the movie. The movie itself, I think, has problems, but it's worth seeing for their vision of the vampires.
I feel like Josh Hartnett's one of those actors who originally had a career because he was so good looking, and I think he's gotten better over time, but he wasn't at the point of his career where I was like, wow, what a good actor here. He's okay. He's there to carry the movie.
Don't you talk about my future ex-husband like that.
He's here to carry the movie, and he does a so-so job of it. You know?
Yeah, I think he was at a point in his career where he could his name could get a movie made, and he was the guy that they got to do the movie. He's fine. I agree with you. He's probably a weak point. I have to say, I don't know that it's a particularly great character.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised they couldn't find a better actor to pull into it.
He's barely a character. You don't really know or care much.
He's basically the lead.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you can say about him. He's the lead and he's a cop, and that's the movie. But
for the record, his deputy is played by Manu Bennett, who recently has gotten famous for playing Deathstroke in the CW universe.
And Spartacus.
And in Spartacus, yeah. Just saying.
I don't remember that.
I agree with you, Russ. This is one of those very rare vampire films where the vampires are supposed to be scary. They're not sexy. They're not, going to woo you and turn you. These guys are just straight up, they're here to eat dinner.
Brutal killers.
Yeah. And it's really weird because there's like this weird, like, they're deformed, they're not pretty, they're very animalistic, but yet they're very well dressed. Which always kind of throws me off a little bit. Like, I'm just like, why are they wearing suits and ties? I don't get that
the one
part.
time a year they go out.
I guess. I mean, that must be it. But I love Josh Hartnett, and maybe I overlook a lot of the faults in his performance because I do love Josh Hartnett. But otherwise, I think this is just a solid vampire film that's like, hey, vampires aren't supposed to be good.
Pretty.
Yeah, pretty.
I mean, I think the one complaint everybody always brings up about this film is that for the first half of the film, the vampires are super speed. And the second half, for some reason, they just kind of amble everywhere.
Yeah.
I think it's after, after a while, they're
full.
full and cold.
They're all
I mean, they
loady.
are in Alaska.
I'll catch you in a minute. I just need a second.
They're wearing loafers.
Well, they do have 30 days to get around to you. You know what I mean?
You guys are all
Probably not
blood
rough.
farting and everything.
If they killed everybody in like 2 days, what would be the point?
And I will say that is a problem with the movie. Is the timeline of the movie? It does not feel like 30 days.
Well, yeah,
It feels
because
like a week.
it's like they're like, okay, they're in this attic and they know they need to get food, and then it moves forward by 7 days. And you're like, when
But
did
the
they
only
get
way you know
food?
that is because the movie
happened?
like says that on screen, right?
Yeah.
So it's the time. I think that's one of the biggest flaws in the movie is you don't feel the 30 days in the way that you need to.
And shout out to Ben Foster for playing the same character every single time in every single movie.
Ben Foster, who needs to avoid roles that might be described as twitchy. So.
I mean, he's the Renfield here.
Yeah.
Actually, I like Ben Foster, and I even like him in this part, but it's kind of like they just write him out of the movie, and I was like, I kind of was hoping he would get something cooler.
It seemed like they could have done more with him.
Yeah.
He's such an interesting part at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of felt like this was the role that really put him on the map in a bigger way, because he did 310, then this, and then he started getting the twitchy characters after this.
Right.
So technically, and then I remember hearing an interview with him where he said like he put like tacks in his shoes, so he could never put full weight down on the foot. So when he walked, he was actually extra, just kind of creepy and twitchy, and was doing.
acting.
He's super method. He's a super method guy. I thought it was a really cool flick. I thought, how did nobody think of this idea in the 100 years Bram Stoker's Dracula had been around? Mm-hmm. And this guy just goes, "I got an idea. Alaska. There's days where it's 30. It's nighttime for 30 days." Genius! I mean, it's high
Steve
concept.
Niles actually had a story about that, which was he had pitched it as a film to various places, and nobody wanted it. And so he ended up making it as a comic book.
Which was a huge hit.
And it jump-started his career, and then he said of course, all of a sudden everybody wanted it, and they went back to those same places, and they said, "Why didn't you bring us this? This is great." And he just said, "I was here." And they're like, "No, I would have remembered that."
But that's become so Hollywood now. It's like so many things are comic books that were originally pitched to Hollywood, they ignored, then they made a comic book, and then Hollywood responded just like that. This comic book in question, Ben Templesmith doing the art, who's
Amazing
I think
artist,
one of
yeah.
the best guys doing art in comics.
It's a gorgeous comic book
Yeah,
if you've never read it.
regularly works with Steve Niles. They're perfectly suited for each other. They did a thing called Welcome to Hoxford. If you've never read that, really recommend that as well.
I actually met him one time at a comic book store here in Austin.
Yeah, he used to live here.
He just literally, somebody wrote him on Twitter or Instagram, goes, "Hey, I just bought like a whole bunch of your comic. Would you mind going by and signing one if you have time?" He just took an Uber over to the comic book store and signed the guy's comics.
He's a really nice guy.
like the sweetest
That's
guy to like
badass.
take time out, and like I was like, "Hey, you're Steve Knight." He goes, "Yeah."
I got to spend an afternoon at Austin Books hanging out with him and Bernie Wrightson together. And
wow.
those two were, Bernie's dead now, but they were really close friends. Did a lot of stuff together, and that was awesome. I'm just like, don't fanboy out, don't fanboy out. And of course, we talk about
Be
everything
cool,
else.
Chris. Be cool.
Keep it cool.
It's just cool when they're good dudes.
Yeah.
And like to me, high concept, nowhere near in my top 10 vampire movies, but fun movie, good movie,
Yeah.
great gore.
Well worth watching.
Agreed.
I mean, I agree with Russ that probably this may be the best vision of vampires of all the movies that we watched. I just was so struck by it when I saw the movie because I think you're right. Like the movie surrounding it is, it's good. It's kind of a fine kind of. David Slade does have a good visual sense. I think he's a good visual director, and he's done a lot of great work since then. He directed the Hannibal pilot, and I think American Gods pilot, but I'm not sure.
He produced it.
He's a really... I mean, I think he's really well suited for visuals, and I think
it's exceptionally well shot. No question.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't. It's a very specific look. He obviously was sort of thinking of the comic book itself and everything. One of the other ways I think that it shows how much he had a vision for the vampires, that in the comic book, the vampires are like a society. They like debate. Like it opens with them like debating we should or shouldn't do this. We're really going out in the open. And then I think there's like a lead vampire who it follows him as he travels there to try and stop them once they've decided to do it. And it just goes to show that their vision was they're not human. They wouldn't be like humans. They would think differently. They would be this sort of, and so. That was what struck me, was their lack of human characteristic, and I really love that. So I think, as we were saying, only scary vampires really in this list. Like I was genuinely unnerved by their presence. I do think Foster is fun, and I do think it's probably one of the best pitches ever for a movie. Like you can't beat the pitch for this movie.
Which immediately, I imagine the guy hearing it going, "How come I didn't think of that?"
I mean, it's so good, and the movie surrounding it kind of turns into a superhero movie at the end a little bit. It's kind of.
Yeah.
I think the third act's a little weak, although it does have a pretty strong ending visually. But it's definitely a solid, cool movie. Like this is a good movie to eat popcorn with and watch with your friends.
Absolutely.
On the couch. Like I think that's the kind of movie this is.
I will say this: I hadn't seen. I mean, I just remember the movie.
Yeah.
I didn't watch this again, but I remember the ending being so striking with what happens in the score and the visual effects that go on at the same time. I still remember the ending very clearly, which most movies I can't say that about.
Yeah.
So I do remember it, and it does stick with you.
It's a striking image.
Yeah.
So.
All right, well, let's move on to a patient's choice, which is Byzantium.
Oh, man.
Oh, no, here we go.
The plot. Hey, I'm with you on this one.
Okay, I actually, this is about a young teenage girl vampire, also emo, for the love of the gods. And her mother, they're on the run, seemingly from a group of vampires called the Brotherhood, and they take solace in this sort of rundown hotel on the coast of Ireland where they meet, I can't remember his name, is it Noel?
Yes.
And
Played by Caleb Landry Jones in an early role.
Yep. And so he takes them in, and it's basically her wanting to tell her story about how she became a vampire, her and her mother's story, and she meets a young lad who they kind of fall for each other.
Oh,
and
yeah, I'm sorry. That's Caleb Landry Jones. My mistake.
They, she ends up wanting, that she just wants to tell her story, I think is the biggest plot point.
Daniel Mays, who most people don't know by name, but he's in British stuff. He's one of those guys who pops up in everything. He's like a character actor. But, this is a Neil Jordan film and not his first vampire film. He made Interview with a Vampire.
Yeah.
Which I actually think is great, the first movie. I really liked it a lot.
Who doesn't like Interview?
It was one of those, I don't think anybody thought it was going to be worth seeing at all, because you're like, seriously? Tom Cruise as Lestat? Fuck you. And then it's like, oh, he's really good in it.
It's funny that
to this day, I'm not sure why people thought that.
And Christian Slater's amazing.
Yeah,
and
it's really good.
It's funny that and Bram Stoker's Dracula aren't on our list.
Yeah, well, because I think we were going with like a little more under the radar stuff. But this is definitely a movie that it seems like a love it or hate it type of one among people. I mean,
it drags. I'll give it that.
I mean, it's slow, but so is Only Lovers Left Alive, or several of our other picks.
Yeah, but Only Lovers Left Alive, they're actually vampires. Mm-hmm. They're not vampires. They're thumb stickers.
But does that really makes all the difference for you? They don't have teeth, they have super sharp
Real quick,
thumbnails.
if Bram Stoker created this is what a vampire is, you can't steal his creation and say this is a vampire.
Well, they require blood to survive, and
so do leeches and mosquitoes.
I call that being a vampire.
Yep.
No, it's not.
Blood to survive, and you.
Just like a car is a car, a motorcycle's a motorcycle. Just because it drives down the road doesn't make it the same thing.
So I picked the two least vampire-y films in your opinion.
You did, 100%, but it's okay. But to me, they're not vampires.
Okay.
Well, that's subjective.
Thumbstick you.
Thumbstickers.
I think Blood and Immortal are the two base things. You have to have those.
It's an interesting point.
You have to have those two or some variation on Blood.
My only note is not a vampire movie. It's my only note.
Variation of Blood.
I just think this is much like we talked about Only Lovers Left Alive. I find this very beautifully atmospheric film.
Agreed.
It's incredibly well acted. I have such a crush on Gemma Arterton.
She's one of my favorites.
The mom. She's incredible, and she regularly is wearing like lingerie and stuff in this, and you're just like,
Because
Jesus.
she's a
She
whore.
does play a hooker.
She's a whore.
Well, I mean, but they're like, as the movie goes into, which it off and on throughout it tells the backstory, how they got there. You understand and feel very sympathetic to her. Why is she a prostitute? Why is she more vicious towards humanity, like they're just our food, than the daughter, Saoirse Ronan is, who's like, I never wanted this. I still don't really want it. But I don't know. I'm stuck at a crossroads of what to do. Where do I go?
Were you done, Patience? I'm sorry, I didn't cut you off.
No, I agree with you 100%. Like, yeah, she didn't ask to be made a vampire, whereas her mother took a more active approach to becoming a vampire. My favorite part of it was actually the vampire making scenes.
Yeah.
On the island, like, I was like, that was interesting and just a beautiful film.
Yeah, it's gorgeously shot, especially those sequences. Like it's such a unique take on how do you become a vampire. It's like, wow, that's cool.
Or a thumbnail sticker.
Or a thumbnail
sticker.
My thing is, I thought it was...
He's a stickler for the thumbnails.
It's not a vampire. They're not vampires. I mean, they're walking around, obviously,
They are daywalkers.
daylight and no fangs.
Hey,
and
Blade
But
is a
it's
daywalker.
Ireland.
that's
though,
because his
so-
mama was bitten while she was pregnant.
Robert
and so-
Pattinson is a daywalker.
That does not count.
Don't count that. But I mean, Ireland doesn't have a whole lot of sun,
True.
so
Okay.
Are they really daywalkers?
Well, here's my thing. I love, Gemma Arterton. She's amazing. Neil Jordan's a pretty good director. I mean, I've liked, a handful of his movies. But it's beautifully shot, great score, really moody, great locations, art direction. I just hated that when I'm watching it, I'm like, why are they on the run? And I don't get that information until an hour and 10 minutes into the movie. They finally reveal only men can be this class.
Only men are allowed to be vampires.
No,
apparently.
only men are allowed to be part of the Brotherhood of the Sticking Thumb of Justice. And I'm like, wait, what?
But I mean, that makes sense in the
No
way the story
girls
is
allowed
told.
in our club.
Because the story is told where you're waiting for them unfolding their story.
It is
and
told
that's
in
part
flashbacks.
of that unfolding of the story. If you tell it so soon, then like that story loses so much of its oomph. That's part of that process, that third act reveal.
I would consider that if when I saw that, it blew my fucking mind, but it didn't. So I'm like, why did you hold out that long? I was like, oh, that's cool. As opposed to being like, I could follow the story and understand their plight. Instead, I'm a stranger watching this, and I don't understand what they... I still enjoyed the movie. I did not hate it. And I thought it was beautiful and cinematic, but not a vampire movie in my opinion.
the thumbsticker.
Thumbsticker movie.
Okay.
Drop the mic.
So,
Russell's like, finally, my turn.
finally, if I could just... Yeah.
He's like, first off, you guys are all wrong, and this movie is
Yeah, I did not like this movie very much. I will concede that I understand everybody else's love for the movie or severe like, whatever. I mean, the movie is... Obviously, Neil Jordan is he's a real director. I mean, he really knows how to do the camera. He knows how to set atmosphere. He's a former, or I guess, author. So his films are very literate and intelligent. And he did Interview with Vampires, so I guess he has that cred. I have to say this about Neil Jordan, and I will say Interview with the Vampire is kind of an outlier to me. I think the guy makes aggressively boring movies. I don't want to turn this into a referendum on Neil Jordan's career, but I will.
Too late.
I will, yeah. And I will say that he
Line has been drawn.
Yeah, if you go back and watch his movies, I think you can say the same thing about most of his movies, even his big movies like The Crying Game. That they're very literate. They're very subtle and smart, but they're just kind of boring and slow. And
I tend to agree with most of his films. He has a few standouts from like that movie I really like. I think The Company of Wolves is a good example too.
which I've never seen, so maybe it's great. But I just this movie has a high mindedness to it that I think just kills the movie for me. I thought it was really, it was slow and it was.
I'll give you that for sure.
And I understand it, but because it wants to be that. It's not trying to be 30 Days of Night or something like that. I just couldn't get into the movie. There was no moment for me where I really fell in love with the movie.
Russ is all like, "It's called the Brotherhood. Of course, women can't join." I don't see the problem.
Rob had a different take on it, and so we talked at length about it. Because again, like I said, I agree with most of y'all's points. I don't totally agree with Phil's point about the thumb sticking, but I think it's an interesting.
You don't agree that they use the thumb to stick people,
but I think it's an interesting point that you stretch the definition of what a vampire is, particularly in this movie, and it's attempting to do its own take on what a vampire is. And
but you can't do that. Somebody created this thing, and he gave you guidelines, and you just said, I'm going to do my own. It's like, you can't. You didn't create
vampire
that.
Has so many I mean, like, but
agree.
30 Days a Night vampires are nothing like Bram Stoker's vampires.
Just athletically different. I mean, that's the only thing they worked out more.
I think that Jordan and the filmmakers, I do think they are going for something different. And I will give them this, because this is something I think we've brought up before on this podcast. There's something about movies that feel that they're above the material. And I don't think this movie is like that. I do think it is ultimately a vampire movie. By their definition, Phil, by their definition.
By theirs.
But I just...
The one thing
there was a lot of...
If you're making a mummy film and you're not wrapped up in cloth, it's not a mummy. End of story.
And I agree with you on that one. I agree. And
if you don't turn into a wolf, you're not a werewolf. I'm just throwing that out there.
But that's a base thing for that. Like, I could think you're a werewolf and you're not allergic to silver. I can deal with that.
I could deal with that.
Okay, so what's the problem with them not having
that they are in the sunlight, they're using thumbs, they don't have things, they can't fly, they can't do...
It never occurred to me that they weren't vampires.
But it's
an interesting...
They literally took like 4 or 5 of the main things.
And
that's Phil's sticking point. He latched onto that.
How do you feel about Megan Fox's thumbs? I'm curious.
Ew, toe thumbs.
Well, the point being is, like, they go into a dark cave and come out. There's like 5 things, major canon things, they just change. Yeah. It's no longer a vampire. Call it something else, like the Sucreans or whatever they call it. They call it that.
You're a purist.
Well, they do.
They do, but when you read every write-up, vampire movie.
Because essentially it's
eventually... No, have the balls to market it as a Sucrean film.
But they actually at some point say, you mean they're vampires.
Say about life force.
Like the teachers say that to them after they've read the story at a certain point.
Yeah, well, because by every definition except their teeth, they're vampires.
Yeah. Can I ask a question? Why is it that... Because this is the same thing in the Twilight movie. It's weird to me that you would have lived for hundreds of years and... You meet like a 16-year-old and you fall in love with them.
Yeah, that's
tell
always
them all your
strange.
secrets.
Yeah, I thought that
to me
was
was just
strange.
And particularly this 16-year-old. This is not a 16-year-old that I would fall in love with and be like, I want to tell you all my secrets and run away with me. What's his name? Caleb. He has. Speaking of Twitchy, he has made a career out of that, and he has cultivated this irritating screen presence.
Yes,
I could not understand for the life of me why she fell in love with this guy.
This is an outlier role for him. He usually plays twitchy villains and stuff, and this is weird that they gave him a protagonist role, but it worked for me because he's supposed to be really sickly. He's dying.
I guess.
I agree with Russ.
But I do agree with you on the point of, like, if you're a vampire. I mean, I'm only 47, and when I look at somebody who's like 25, I'm like, you look like you're 12.
Not to mention, like, you've been a vampire for hundreds and hundreds of years, and you didn't learn any skill other than whoring.
That was the same thing that I thought, which was you haven't figured out another way, or you haven't saved up your whoring money and put it in a savings bond or a stock market or something. That to me was surprising. Like, well, I guess we're just going to be whores for hundreds of years. That you're not killing it on the vampire front. That's all I'm saying.
I'm not saying you're not a vampire. I'm just saying that you could be a better vampire.
Yeah.
I think that
I got to go to my shifted Applebee's now.
Overall, I think this is a very beautiful film, and it's nice. And actually, several of our films today that we're going to talk about are female-driven, which is really nice to see, in my opinion. So
I agree with you, and I do think that was one of the reasons I appreciated that you picked this movie, was the female take.
I was Russ had already seen it, and he was not in love with the movie, so I was hesitant when I went to watch it. And the same with Jordan, that most of his stuff is, again, he's a really, I think, strong visualist, and he really understands how to direct big movies and how to stage things, how to work with actors. But you watch something like In Dreams, and it looks amazing, it's staged amazing, but it's sort of dull. and it doesn't always
Or
make sense.
the Brave one with Jodie Foster. It's barely a vigilante.
This one started that way for me. The two leads, Gemma Atherton and especially
Saoirse Ronan.
Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Saoirse. I've seen her in quite a few. She is someone I think is so good. I will literally watch a movie because she's in it.
Agreed.
I think she's luminous. I think she projects such a deep feeling when she's on screen. Just her face is like there's just a million things going on there. So I just loved watching her in this movie, and she has a lot to play. And it was also fun to kind of watch her be, in a genre film, which I don't, like she was in Hannah and stuff like that. I think
Wasn't
it's cool.
she in Stoker?
Yeah.
No,
No.
That's the one from
Wasikowski.
Yeah.
Was that Wasikowski? Okay.
So, one of the things but as the movie went on, I unlike Phil, I did not know that there was going to be this pulpy aspect of this brotherhood and this thing where they take you to this island and these people that were hunting them. And the movie slowly reveals that. So to me, the movie got more interesting as the pulpier aspects took over. So I was starting to get really into it. Like I was like, oh wow. Like I didn't know any of that was going to be in the movie. I thought it was just going to be these girls and they would kind of argue with each other and they had this relationship but they're vampires. And instead, it kind of turns into this more, not action, but more of a mystery thriller thing going on there. And I really liked the origin that they set out for them, because you don't know everything about how they got to be vampires, and usually you just allude to that or yeah. I mean, I liked all that, and I thought it was neat the way they reveal it in pieces, like throughout the movie. Like, there's bits and pieces slowly, and you slowly get the big picture until it builds to the end when they all show up.
Which felt really forced to me when Sam Riley, all of a sudden, like he's met her twice his entire 500-year existence. It's just like, you know what? Despite my loyalty to this brotherhood, I'm gonna drop everything for somebody I've met twice.
She's so hot.
She's hot.
Why?
And I'm not gonna give away any spoilers, but I'm like, really? That's the choice you make?
I don't know. That tracked for me only because I felt like they set his character up. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. That's not a factor in most things.
When you see their history together, he feels guilty from the get-go about what happened to her,
right?
Because of Johnny Lee Miller's
one
character.
person that he's met in the span of a century.
He's a good guy.
But this person was at the moment when he becomes a vampire. So I did feel that was important to him.
So was Homeboy who saved his life, who was with him at the end,
and he had spent a long time
saved his life,
like trying to find her. With the Brotherhood, so I did feel
just saying the guy who he betrays saved his life when he's dying.
Yeah,
just throwing that out there.
Whatever.
I
feel like if you had a guy,
she's got really nice boobs.
Yeah, if you had a guy who's an old friend, and then like he may have saved your life when you're in the military, but then he turns into a total annoying maninist, and you'd be kind of like,
I mean, he literally is like, I hate these crying women.
Yeah,
like really,
you're just like,
he's
dude,
a
I'm not with you.
Yeah,
I'm like, I know you saved my life and all, but you're a dick.
No one in my
After 500 years, he brings up every time.
He literally
I'm gonna buy you dinner. I saved your life.
Has a poster on his door that says "No girls allowed."
Yeah,
dude, it's like you're like, what do I got to do? I introduce you to David Bowie. I got us out of the War of 1812. Yeah. Come on, what do you want from me?
All right.
Well, all right. One of the more controversial choices so far.
Indeed,
it was fun though.
Yeah, it's a cool movie.
Let's go into one that's probably not a controversial choice, which is a Philip choice, which is Let the Right One In. We are, of course, talking about the 2008 Swedish version of the original version based on the 2004 novel, which, by the way, if you haven't read anything else by this author, John, I cannot pronounce his last name, Lindqvist, or his middle name, his stuff is great. He's written several sort of different takes on horror. He does a great zombie one that French show, The Return, felt like it was kind of a take on. It's not, but it's a similar theme. But there's an American version of this film a lot of people have seen called Let Me In, which I actually will defend and say I think was a really good movie.
But to me, that's
they're not essential to watch if you've already seen the other. You can watch one and go, okay, I saw this movie.
But to me, that's like saying you can watch a 10 out of 10 or you can watch a 6.5, slow 7 out of 10.
Oh, I don't know. I would give them right around the same rating. I give this more points because it came out first, but I think it's an exceptional remake.
I mean, again,
we're not discussing the remake.
No, this to me is a masterpiece and one of the greatest vampire films ever made.
What's it about, Phil?
This is about pretty much, yeah. Well, this is about a young kid who's he's bullied. He's probably about a 12-year-old or 11-year-old kid who's bullied at school, and he's got no friends, and he's, almost looks kind of albino-ish. He's very frail and very, very blonde, and he winds up meeting his exact opposite, who's a dark-haired, mysterious girl who moves in next to him, and she happens to be a vampire, and she has pretty much a manservant with her that protects her and does things with her, because you don't realize, being a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old kid, no matter how intelligent you are, you can't buy a house, you can't drive a car, you can't do so many things legally, so she actually has to have an adult, pretty much manservant to do things for her. And throughout the story, you get to see these two characters change and kind of grow together, and it's a beautiful story about acceptance and about, overcoming, a lot of, bad things in life, and they both have them, and it's interesting, even like the character of, was it Hakar, is that his name? Hakan? It's interesting because, like, it's her manservant guy. There's scenes in this movie that are just, you watch them, like the scene with the acid. That's one of the most powerful scenes in any vampire movie I've ever seen in my life, or any movie, period. I mean, it's powerful. And the movie's just, it doesn't take genre as saying, well, I guess we can be B-rate. It takes genre and says we're a class act, and it puts it up there at a level with any movie that can win an Oscar. I mean, this movie is just beautifully shot. Everything in it, even all the sound was actually, they made it a point that all the sound had to be analog. So that way it actually really sounded like it wasn't digitized. It was analog, then digitized. Huh. So everything sounded like it was a real kill, a real noise. Every single prop that was made was literally made to make sure it fit into actual cinema scopes, like the jungle gym. The bridge, where she kills the one guy under the bridge. They searched everywhere for the proper bridge. That way when a car's driving over top, you could still see the car, and it wouldn't be too high of a bridge. I mean, this guy spent a year casting these actors. Mm-hmm. This is a man who literally made one movie in 6 years, and he made this movie. Yeah. And it's beautiful. And then he went on to do Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy after that. Another beautiful movie, though.
I don't care for it.
Not a great movie, but beautifully shot and meticulously planned movie.
That's one of the ones every other really serious film critic gets mad at me, because I'm like, I think that's one of the most boring movies I've ever seen in my life.
Beautiful and meticulous. So I love this movie. I mean, I can talk for hours about it, so pass the mic.
I honestly don't know anyone who didn't like this movie, to be honest. It really did turn the vampire genre on its head, and it brought a new life, I think, to the genre. I do want to say that Hacken as the manservant is probably like the least effective manservant ever. Like, he literally, his one job is to kill dudes for Eli, and he can't do it. Like, he fails every single time, to the point where he does have to get captured by police and disfigure himself. So I thought that was kind of fun. But otherwise, I feel like this is really a story. It's not the vampire part is second fiddle to the friendship. And this is really a story about friendship.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
Something interesting which they don't capture on is in the book, Hawkins actually a pedophile.
Yeah, he's
and what it doesn't, and it barely touches on with Eli is that she, by her maker, was pretty much female castrated and stitched up.
Right.
So you've got a man who lusts after children, is in love with her, but can't do anything about it. And winds up being really hurt later on when he goes, I wish you wouldn't see that boy anymore.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of really complex shit going on in this movie. And some of it, you think about, like, part of that has to do with his ineffectiveness at being who he is anymore. You know, about, like, I'm trying to kill these things, but do I have it in me anymore, too?
There's a lot of, stuff that is kind of ahead of its time for a movie in 2008 that has to deal with androgyny, and could be viewed as pretty squicky to deal with as well. I mean, the fact there's essentially a romance going on between these two young kids, not a sexual one, which is actually impossible for the vampire, as you said, is kind of, because of the nature of when they became a vampire and being castrated, is
though that's not in this movie explicitly.
It just shows it when she changes.
Yeah. Right. Well, and then she also says, I'm not a girl at one point.
Yeah.
Or what did she say? Would you like me better if I was...
She says, we can't be boyfriend and girlfriend because I'm not a girl.
I'm not a girl. And then when she changes, it shows the scar. But yeah, it's not super explicit. It's not talked about.
It didn't need to be either, which I thought was perfect. The way they handled it was perfect.
I actually missed that the first time I watched it. It was only when I rewatched it, I was like, holy shit, she's a boy. I didn't even realize that. It went way over my head the first time. Well, yeah.
She's
just
a vampire.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a masterpiece on so many levels. It's just mood, tone, story, You're just enveloped by this movie when you watch it. You're just sucked in so many ways, and it is a really beautiful piece of art. The DP is I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, but it's Hoyt van Hatima.
Good job.
He went on to do Dunkirk, Her, Spectre. Like, he is now just jumped a level. Like, he's one of the biggest DPs in the world, and you can see why. But I think the real credit to the movie is the director. I think Thomas Amerson, like, he just, is that how you say his name? Alfredson. He has, when you see this and Tinker Tailor, regardless of your feelings about Tinker Tailor, the dude is a visionary. Like,
he's Kubrick, man, to me.
Yeah.
He's so meticulous.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it, and you feel that in the movie and the storytelling. It's very specific. His movies almost exist out of time. Like, they're just, they're not like anything else anybody's doing when he makes them. So I don't think he's made a movie since Tinker Tailor.
He's got a new one coming up very shortly. The trailers are out for now, called The Snowman, with Michael Fassbender and Rebecca Ferguson.
Yay.
That looks
sounds
really
amazing.
good. Yeah.
So,
great trailer. We reviewed the trailer a couple weeks ago. I was like, God damn, this looks amazing.
I'm going to watch that immediately after this thing is over. So, I don't... If you're a fan of this podcast and you like horror movies, like, it's kind of hard to believe you wouldn't love this one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just next level stuff, but it's still a genre film. I think it still does all the vampire stuff. It still has stuff going on. It's not like trying to reinvent vampires or do something different with them.
It does add the with the name "Let the Right One In." It actually finally shows, which I know the author fought for, what happens when you don't invite a vampire in.
Yeah.
No vampire movie had actually really shown, and he created his own canon on that.
That's hardly ever used anymore.
And it was such
which I thought was interesting.
Cool thing.
It was the name of his story, and so he actually fought to have it in there. And you see her start bleeding from every pore and orifice, and then it had to finally be invited in.
Right.
And he fought to have it in. I thought it was a cool, a good fight to have.
The kids are amazing.
Yeah.
Kid actors are such a mixed bag. When they're, and these two are just. I can see it took a year to find somebody like that. They're really amazing. You never doubt them. You never think twice about them. I mean, the idea that she's a vampire that's lived for I don't even know how long, but is an adult, and then he's a kid and struggling, and it's a period piece as well, if I remember correctly. It's
80s.
It's the 80s, which is neat. They don't
hit on it, but you can feel it.
It's there, which is another great aspect to it. So I was a big fan.
I don't have anything to add. It's fucking masterpiece. It's everything everybody says it is, and if you haven't seen it, you're really missing out. That's it. And I agree with Patience. Like, I can't think of anyone that's seen this movie that doesn't love it.
Yeah, so, I didn't see the remake. I'm not. It's weird to me. It seems like one of the most inessential remakes ever.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, there's a lot of people who sadly just aren't going to seek out like the indie films or foreign films. Yeah. And I have some friends who I will defend on that level who are like, look, man, I'm kind of dyslexic. I can't keep up with subtitles.
I have friends that hate subtitles and just can't do it.
And you're like, okay, like I would love to watch that film, but I don't want to watch a dubbed version because those are always horrible. And you're like, okay, so there's a certain amount of defense for that. I mean, it's an almost identical film. It really is. There's just a few differences where they unfortunately chose to use CG instead of practical for a couple of things. But I will say the filmed car accident in that
I was about to say the same thing.
Is astonishing. It's
same
like
thing.
the best like what it's like to be in a car accident ever.
Well, the camera's mounted on the front. And it's a still mounted camera, so as the car is getting wrecked, the camera's moving with the car.
Yeah.
And you feel like, you're like, holy shit, I am in this car. Now, I will say that was the one thing about that film that I go, that was better than the original.
Yeah,
that one scene. But everything else cinematically, like, it's just kind of like, I mean, to me, cinematically, it's just a huge difference between them. But story-wise, it's the same story.
Fair enough. All right, so we're going to go, obviously this is going to have to be split up into 2 episodes, which I could have told you before. So the end of our first half, we'll go with my choice, which is the legendary masterpiece of film, Life Force. Okay, I fully admit...
Bomb thrower Chris.
Life Force is totally a B film, to be sure. But it's kind
on
of...
an A level.
I thought it was D's.
But it is one of my favorite B films of all time. I would add Life Force to my list of like the great John Carpenter films and all those where you're the ones where you're like, yeah, of course this isn't like something that you go and you show in film class or something. But for people who love just a super fun, really inventive, like horror take on horror, Life Force is it, baby. And this is Tobe Hooper, of course, did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, changed the world with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Here, this is based on a book. I've read and owned the book version of
What a shock.
Read it before I saw the movie.
Oh my
Colin
God,
Wilson.
what a nerd.
The Space Vampires is what it's called. The idea
It's
being...
actually called Space Vampires.
Yeah,
It's called Space Vampires.
They had to change the name because the studio thought it was too B-rate.
Well, it's funny. The author, Colin Wilson, tends to do, when he does write genre stuff, he writes a lot of nonfiction too. His genre stuff is always a very thinly veiled allegory for what he's actually talking about, and the book is that way.
What was he talking about?
Yeah, I didn't.
That's a
This
plot.
is an allegory for something?
Yeah, the movie not so much. This is so loosely based on the book, really loosely. The idea is space shuttle finds this huge spaceship hidden inside of the tail of Halley's Comet, which seems unlikely.
It was 85. It was a different time.
They go inside and they find tons of dead, strange, like alienish, like giant bat creatures that are just dry and brittle. And then they find these beautiful glass boxes with incredibly gorgeous naked people inside them, a woman and two men. Then they're like, well, let's take them back with us. Well, on the way back, people lose contact with the ship. Come back, there's only one survivor, Steve Railsback. Go Railsback!
Wow.
And the vampires such escape, with most notably Matilda May plays the just knockout gorgeous lead vampire.
Oh, yeah.
Who
Matilda May and her titties.
who goes who goes around and is, instead of sucking blood, they suck out the titular life force. Sounds weird to say titular. I'm
I'm with you, though.
and Steve Railsback is sort of in a position where he's the one guy who can track them down and stop them.
He has a psychic link.
He has a psychic link with her, like almost a sort of lover's intimacy. They intimate throughout it, and he's used to sort of be their hound dog to track them down. As Matilda May can not only like get around anywhere she wants, very graphically sucking the life force out of some people till they're just a husk, but actually inhabiting other people's bodies, including one very memorable sequence where she's inhabiting Patrick Stewart, who makes out with Steve Railsback.
Sir Patrick Stewart?
Yeah, Sir Patrick Stewart. Have you ever seen that gif of Patrick Stewart making out with another dude? That's from this movie. This is just one of those movies so, pardon the pun once again, batshit insane that I just adore it. It's just, it gets crazier and crazier as it goes on. It actually has some very innovative use of visual effects here. And it's just fun. Is it poorly acted? Oh yeah. Is it a ridiculous plot with lots of holes in it? Mm-hmm. But is it really fun to watch and a very different take on vampires than you've ever seen before? Yes and yes.
I don't even know what to say about Life Force, to be honest with you. I am astonished that this had a $25 million budget. I agree.
all on the screen.
I
Yeah, it's like the apocalypse is happening by the end of it.
Seriously, I agree with you on every single point that you just made, though. This is seriously one of the craziest films. I mean, they just put everything in there. It's not just vampires; it's zombies. It's the apocalypse of London. There's
You're like,
there's a lot of like dream sex sequences with space vampires.
yeah.
I mean, I don't
And
even.
in this case, I'm like, thank you, film.
I mean, you had me at space vampires, basically. This is a really crazy film, but I actually found myself enjoying it. Like, I didn't want to. I really did not want to like this film.
Fuck Chris, I'm gonna hate this.
I
movie.
know. Oh, this is terrible. But I found myself entertained, strangely enough. It's a terrible, terrible film. It's really, really bad. But it's one of those so bad, it's actually kind of good.
Fair enough.
That's the best
I
I
can't
can
wait
do.
to see Philip, who was commenting me up, commenting online about this, who was like criticizing, and at the end he's like, okay, that was pretty fun.
Well, man, the first 10 minutes are just god-awful.
Yeah.
Literally, there are, like, these fake-looking vampires hanging by, like, thread, and you can see, like, the nylon thread holding these vampires. I go, this isn't the 1920s. Come on, man. And
What part of that isn't awesome?
Yeah.
I love that.
well, I had to prepare myself to, like, once I got into it's not supposed to be good.
Yeah.
I was okay with it. And you can't really critique this movie. It's just fun. And, like, as long as, you are allowed to, like, smoke something or drink something and watch this, you're going to have a fucking blast.
I was sober when I watched this film.
Wow.
I know.
I was not.
I should have recommended.
If you were
getting
drunk,
fucked
it would
up.
have sobered you up.
Yeah, right? Maybe I would have liked it even more.
Yeah, it's, You get to see Professor X in the wheelchair for the first time. There's that.
True.
That's cool.
His origin story.
I feel like
Origin story.
a lot of the special effects, like he was just like went on like a Highlander binge, and because I was just like, hey, that's the quickening. That's what's going on
when you
right
look
now.
about when this came out, this followed. He made this after Poltergeist, and that the whole visual effect, swirling stuff, looks exactly like all the ghost effects in Poltergeist. It's the same thing.
You know what I hate about it, though? Is that the special effects blew away the visual effects so much so, and, like, yeah, they had Dykstra on there, and it's like, cool, the guy made the lightsaber. I'm like, dude couldn't make a spaceship to save his fucking life. Use a model, man. Use a model. You were on Star Wars.
The scenes with London are a model.
No, those are models.
Yeah.
Sure, the spaceships are not models, and they look horrible.
those are
It looks hand-drawn by,
like 150 foot long meter or something. Mile.
Yeah, it's okay. We can do meters. They were in London.
Yeah. Could have been cool.
God, I was going to say something else about that. Got another note here.
Do these guys count as vampires?
No, not really.
I don't.
It's based on a book called The Space Vampire.
That's what I was going to say. Something that was cool about it was how they actually kept some of Bram Stoker's original stuff in there with, like, having a ship show up where everyone's dead. And that was cool. It was kind of a little throwback to the boat
Yeah, there's a
showing up.
bunch of little tiny...
And then the Nosferatu hands
with
with the naked girl's tits kind of walking forward, and then it's like, it was the exact same shot as Nosferatu's hands, just a naked girl's shadow.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's kind of a cool throwback homage, and there were some really cool tongue-in-cheek B-rate homages to the classics, and I thought that was cool. And I'm out.
All right. I got a lot of shit to say about this movie.
I can't strap in.
Yeah. And first of all, what I want to say when Chris picked this movie, I think this is exactly the kind of movie that we should talk about on this podcast. I do think this is a deep cut. I think it's a fun movie to talk about. It's interesting for so many levels, just the context of the movie and what they're trying to do and what they failed at and what they succeeded at, I guess. I don't know. But Life Force is a one-of-a-kind movie on so many levels. The first thing,
for good reason.
Yeah, and the first thing I want to say about the movie is it is a canon movie. There is nothing better than seeing that canon logo at the beginning of the movie and thinking, yeah, I'm in for some shit. This is going to be crazy. And it probably won't necessarily be good. And there's just, I feel like there is a canon vibe to a movie, and this thing has it. It's all over the place. You can just feel the guys in rooms with cocaine dripping out of their noses saying, and then we'll do this crazy thing and this, and it just, there is no attempt to have the movie make sense in any real way at all. The movie, I think what I find interesting about the movie is it's from, is it 85?
Yeah, 85.
85, 84? And I cannot get over that the film. What is going on?
There's a cat hissing in the background at something.
We've got cat
The
problems.
cat is irritated by your take on life.
The cat is wrong. What I was going to say was so the movie came out in what, 84, 85? Is that right?
Yeah, 85.
I want to say it came out in the summer of that year. So this movie is contending with films like Back to the Future. Somebody said we should take Life Force and drop it in the middle of like the 80s summer, and people were like, this is going to be awesome. So I love that about it. It does kind of have the 80s widescreen feel to it. So I really enjoyed that to the movie. And it has a ton of great British actors just slumming it, just picking up a paycheck. And I gotta say, it is crazy to me that you have these really good British actors, and then you have Steve Railsback. Yeah. And I want to take a minute and talk about Steve Railsback. He is, I do not understand this guy's career. He definitely has his own style of acting.
Nobody's ever described him as a great actor.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's acting. He basically, like, shouts lines at people in a staccato fashion, and he has done this in every movie I've ever seen him in. And I don't know who said, guys, we got to make this giant space vampire movie. You know who's a sexy cool lead? Steve fucking Railsback.
Well,
Can we get fucking Railsback?
They couldn't get William Shatner.
They couldn't
tried.
get William Shatner.
The other staccato spaceman.
It is, but Shatner is great at that, and his is just the horrible version
Why
of
would
it.
vampires need a starship?
It I have to say, it's such a weird exploitive movie. There also is. The rules make no sense to this movie. They are constantly changing, literally from minute to minute within the same scene. I never figured out what the rules of these space vampires were ever. You cannot chart it. The other thing I want to say about the movie is it is incredibly homophobic. It has this bizarre scene where the space vampire has taken over Patrick Stewart and Steve Railsback is drawn to him, her, whichever you want to say, and he starts to. He's forced to make out with him, and the guys have to pull him off, and it's almost though they're more horrified that he's making out with a man than a vampire, which I just could not get over. It's a very strange scene, and in the middle of a really strange movie.
I will defend that scene because it's not a little homophobic, for sure it is, but that it is one of the ultimate. You will stop everything you're doing and watch this scene.
It is. It's in a movie that you will stop everything to watch. The other thing I want to say is there is a crazy bat creature at the end that is worth seeing this movie for.
Totally.
If you're a fan of crazy bat creatures, this is really great.
This is your crazy bat
So this movie is, I think, kind of a forgotten movie and certainly far from universally beloved. But if you're interested in movies, and I want to say, it's not necessarily an entertaining movie, but it is entertaining in being that great kind of bad movie. But it is something to see, and I do have to recommend it to film fans. And I know a lot of people would say, why would you make me watch it? And it goes on and on. It is a very long movie.
Did you watch the director's cut?
And there has, I guess...
the director's cut's a lot longer.
It really is crazy, and you can't believe Tobe Hooper, who directed Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed this movie.
I know, right?
It's crazy. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a masterpiece. It is a phenomenal movie. It is beyond what you would think a movie called Texas Chainsaw Massacre would be. And Hooper, I guess, had a contract with Canon in the 80s, and he made Invaders from Mars. He remade Invaders from Mars. Also a crazy, weird, junky movie. He made the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which I guess has its fans. It's a very strange
it as
movie.
What he intended, which is that I really think it's ridiculous people like Texas Chainsaw Massacre as much as they do, so I'm kind of doing a parody, a send-up of it, and everyone's like, I don't get it. I'm like, you watch it as a satire, it's actually a pretty good movie.
Is it?
I think so.
And then you have this movie. So he really went off, and
Poltergeist.
They threw money,
arguably Poltergeist,
Yeah.
arguably Poltergeist, but. As far as this Canon trilogy that he made, I mean, they really did give him some big budgets and let him go wild with these movies. And what he gave them, it's a crazy artifact from the 80s. It's not really like any other 80s movie. I
would call it like one of those films that, it's not a good film, but it's so essential to watch anyway. If you really want to see the 80s at its weirdest and wildest, Life Force is got to be in the top 10.
I could not agree with you. And you know, it's interesting with 80s movies. People return to these 80s movies and they talk about the same 80s movies over and over again. But this is also a great 80s movie and shows the kind of filmmaking that was going on at that time. Even if it's not a successful movie, it very much fits into that kind of feeling that the 80s movies have. It's just a different feel than you would get from something like an Amblin movie.
So I'm reading different quotes and whatnot off of the commentary track
great
with
stuff.
Tobe Hooper and some other people. And I mean, this movie's all about just Matilda May just being naked.
Yeah.
And this quote is, in the early stages of shooting, waxing her completely so she was completely and totally nude, long pause, that was a way we would think that would make her look less nude. It didn't work, so we had to grow back a little bit of that bikini thing.
That's a lot of thought.
Deep thoughts.
There's so many great quotes around this movie. Like Colin Wilson, who wrote the book, said, John Fowles once told me that the film of the Magus was the worst movie ever made. After seeing Life Force, I sent him a postcard telling him I had gone one better.
Yeah. There was something else I wanted to say about this movie. I listened to Walter Hill's been on podcast recently with his new movie. And he spent a while talking about Dan O'Banion's original script for Alien that he had written and that he had sent to his Walter Hill had sent to his writing partner David Giler and said, read this script. And Giler read 30 pages of the script and called him back and said, "This script is terrible. Why are you having me read this?" And he said, "Wait till you get to the one part," which we all know what part that was in Alien, yeah. But he talked about that it had all this crazy stuff in it, like, Mayan temples and just weird stuff. And I have to think this movie probably comes closer to what O'Bannon's original script for Alien might have been.
Wow.
I definitely had that feeling that this was more of what he was trying to do for that. I also want to say, as far as the Matilda May thing, I think there was another quote from O'Bannon that I remembered where he said they had written it that it had to be this beautiful woman and it was just, she was stunning and you would be drawn to her. And he said, "Good luck." And he said, "Wow, Hooper really did find that girl." And I do have to say, Matilda May, she is luminous in this movie. And it's weird because it's her in the middle, and it's definitely an exploitative role, but she is amazing.
She didn't even speak English when she did this role.
I want to say she did it phonetically. Yeah. So
that is true.
But sorry, Rob. I took all your time.
I mean, she is one of the most beautiful women in film in this film. Where you're like, my God, she can't take her eyes off her. She's so.
There is kind of almost a Brigitte Bardot kind of 70s art house feeling to her.
Yeah, I don't think I responded as passionately as Russ did to this movie. So I kind of I watched it. I was kind of like, cool. This is some what the fuck kind of shit. And
you're like, fuck. I bet you said fucking cocks 18 times.
God damn it, Chris.
Well, it's weird because as with all these things, I do feel like there is elements of this movie that were interesting to me and would grab me, but most of it is a head scratcher. You're just like, why did they set this movie in London? Why did they hire Tobe Hooper? What in Tobe Hooper's career made you think this is the guy? Give him the space movie, it makes no sense, and he brings that to it. You're just like, you're out of your element here, and
Hooper, you are out of your element.
Yeah, Hooper, you feels like you wandered in the middle of the movie, but. Some of the special effects in this movie are incredibly dicey. They are a mixed bag at best. There is a sequence where they self-destruct the ship, and it was great. It was like this really amazing thing where it rails back. I think because he doesn't have to act much, he just has to float. But it's really exciting. It was really well shot, well staged. The special effects were good. And there's a point at the end, speaking of the vampire stuff, where they connect the space vampires and say, like, they've been here before. They have a history. They're why we have vampires in our legends. And I thought I think that was the one moment I thought, I see why Chris suggested this movie. Like, okay, that's kind of a cool idea. So there's stuff going on, but the movie itself, as Russ said, like, it just, you don't understand what's happening.
Phil looked so cynically at me when you said that.
No,
he just kind of did the slow movie turn where he looks at me and just stares at me.
You guys can't see it, but I'm side-eyeing Chris. I'm side-eyeing the fuck out of Chris. But, yeah, Chris, you're in my eye line, so you get that. But I did... again with Ross, it is a canon movie from the 80s, so it's trashy. It's it's nutso. It doesn't seem that they didn't seem to spend a lot of time on making sure the script was right. That doesn't seem to be a priority. The
script really wasn't a priority.
It really
for this film.
It really is a unique movie. I will probably say that's its biggest strength, is that it is unlike anything.
And I don't know that that's what they were trying to go for.
Yeah,
no, they were trying to make a good movie. It just
they were trying to make an
alien
alien vampire.
I guess they gave it to Hooper because he'd done Salem's Lot. And that's it's not on our list, but if you haven't seen Salem's Lot, the TV version, it is a really solid, cool movie. It's probably the only other great Tobe Hooper thing besides, for me, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Poltergeist?
And,
well, once again, Poltergeist, you hear different stories from people who worked on that film,
Spielberg?
whether Spielberg actually directed most of it.
I have to say, I like Salem's Lot and Texas Chainsaw better than Poltergeist.
Yeah, Poltergeist I have problems with. But watching Poltergeist, I would probably argue it's definitely more of a Spielberg movie. I mean, it's just the compositions, the staging, it's a Spielberg movie to me. But I don't know. We'll never know for sure who did what. Overall, with this movie, if you like B movies, and you want like a beer drinking draft house movie, this is the movie. You know what I mean? This is definitely throw stuff at the screen.
This is a weird Wednesday movie.
Or a Master Pancake.
You won't be mad at this movie. I mean, it gives you a lot of shit you want.
Whatever
gonna
it
be
does,
bored.
it goes all the way. You know, and I think you got to give them props for that. Like, I don't know where their heads are at, but
and you can
100% in.
And you can be that friend that brings it up at the party. Oh, you haven't seen Life Force? And look at people like they're fucking idiots.
This would make a great drinking game.
I do want to say before we wrapped up on here, just some of the negative reviews are the best. I love negative reviews sometimes when they're just the critics hate it so much they come up with such great descriptions. One critic called it hysterical vampire porn. Which, and somebody else said it plays like a tap dancing zombie. I was like, I don't even know what.
It's hard to describe this film in terms of other movies. It's just a one of a kind train wreck. So
yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah,
I give it a try is what I can say, because you might fall in. I love this movie in that deeply ironic way.
Yeah,
I mean, I admit it. Yes,
it is. It defines camp in that you can tell when they're making this. They're like, yeah, this is great, man. We're gonna kill it. Like, everybody's gonna love this. We got this naked chick. We got vampires. We got dudes making out. Like, it's on point.
London is blowing up.
Yeah, and
every time you think this can't get more insane, it goes, oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, hold my beer and watch this.
Literally, end of the world stuff. But I do have to say, so I think it defines camp in that there is not a trace of irony to this movie. They play everything straight, and that alone is worth seeing the movie for.
Well, we will break there for this first episode because we're at an hour and 43 minutes.
Jesus.
And so we will continue with a part 2 where we get to see everybody's second choice, which will definitely be a shorter show because we don't have the big lead-in of the 3 films. But until then, yada yada, whatever our catchphrase is, was it keep screaming? Keep screaming? Sure, if you want to.
Oneofus.net has been your one-stop shop for all things geek for years. But there's a side to them many of you have never heard. The subscription side. Subscribe and listen to great podcasts like The Breakfast Pub, The Original Gentleman, and the Watch a Movie With Us series. Head on over to oneofus.net and don't forget your towel.